And how many of you have, like super rich like me, one iPhone and an Android? One test device, okay. So how many of you use Facebook in this group of pool? Facebook as an app, WhatsApp, Instagram, whatever. Two phones, do you find the consistency across? Yeah? No? Okay, that's their problem. That's the intention that I'm trying to solve here today. So when we want to get things fast, in an Indian culture, right, in the startup world of India, or even in a company, in a large scale company, what we want to do is deliver fast. And we can't be writing UI. I absolutely hate writing UI, but I'm giving a UI talk. That's the benefit of having so much of years of experience that I can bring you some points that you may utilize in your day-to-day operation, okay? How many of you have baked a cake over here? Okay, one of you, 2, 3, 4. Okay, cool. How easy is it? Any ideas? No? Okay, let's take a visual clue over here. This is the cake I'm very interested. Sorry for the bottom stack on the bottom. Literally bhook lag raha hai. So this cake, I want to build it. If I take this as a design element, right? What happens here? I need ingredients, correct? I need the famous Nani's recipe, right? Because I'm not a good cook. And then obviously I need an oven. Why I'm taking all this through is because I want to bring you a thought process of what design systems are, right? Next, I need time and patience. How many of you have waited for the oven to say ding and then, oh yeah, cake ready hai? Or you, like most of you guys, I'm also a Swiggy or a Zomato guy. Kaun banayega cake, right? But still, let's think through the process. Let's say I have a process of cake making, okay? I have a shop where I'm going to sell cakes. Imagine me as a chef topi today. Like I'm going to be wearing the chef hat. And I have these hundreds of users that are coming to me, okay? Or let's call it 20 over there. Now the intention I'm trying to do is build 1 cake, 2 cake, 5 cake, 20, whatever that number is, single person. Now imagine I introduce something like this, more users. What's going to happen to me? Main to pagal ho jaunga, right? Like I'm going to be like way too exhausted by the end of the day because there's so many cakes to make and so much of effort. Just imagine putting icing on the cake. There is the batter, there is then that oven process and so forth. There's so much to do, right? What happens if such a thing happens? I'm going to hire one more chef, correct? Now think of it like a developer. If you're a developer who's making an app, your manager comes and says to you, hey, can we please build 2 more features and deliveries by tonight? Aaj Saturday, Monday ko hame live jana hai. Just imagine that scenario, right? Similar for a chef. Now there are so many more users coming to me asking for, sir, aapka cake best hai, but I want like, 4 kgs of it. And every such user multiply by 200. Imagine, like, that's crazy, right? Now, I hire a new guy. Now, imagine I start splitting it up. The more the users, what's happening here? Look at the blue color on the screen. All the chefs, there are 4 chefs now to target 100 audience per chef. Do you see a problem in this scenario? Right? It's a huge problem because now everyone has to be on the same performance level. Everyone needs to know how to make the cake the way I make. 3 other guys need to be trained the way I am, correct? Now this is a very visual talk, right? This is a very design problem, right? If I have to design a cake, it takes a lot of effort to put, icing, put those sprinklies and stuff, right? It's a huge process. The problem here is, I'm definitely lost. I'm definitely lost in this ocean of, developers out there. How many of you are actually planning to become a mobile developer or are in the mobile developer space right now? I know this is a mobile track, but I'll still ask. Yeah, as expected, there are 2-3 hands that didn't go up. How many of you are actually iOS developers? Ye galat conference hai. Sorry guys, this is not. But we'll convert you to Android for sure, okay? Now, you get this problem, right? We have so much of, like, itna content hai bahar. Like, we have so much of inconsistencies across documentation and stuff. And then there is this mammoth of a thing where you pick one, like design. Your designer comes and says, build it this way. Or heck, even if you don't have a designer, you're working for a small startup, they have a very simple design process. Ye screen bana ke do, I don't care how. You're going to look at inspirations from different apps. I took example of Insta, Facebook. How many of you had that managers that say, "Arey Swiggy pe location picking aise chalta hai." How many of you built a location picker just like Swiggy? Or another example, how many of you built a login page just like another app? Raise your hands. You get the gist, right? Like itna mehnat hota hai wo. Kisi aur ka thought process utha ke, then you have to build it. You're seeing an end result getting converted. So definitely I'm a lost person like this, correct? Now taking that cake example back, I have a lot of problems right now. I have to hire these 3 other guys, correct? But I get an idea. I'm the smart one here. I'm the first owner of this project, correct? I'm going to take an idea in my mind, This is the cake I want to present to you guys, okay? Don't worry, aaj pata nahi cake hai ya nahi lunch mein, but I'm going to tempt you with cake. The intention is, just think of the visual. Look at how complex this process is, right? I have a blue icing on the top, I have a base, I have like multi-layers, then there is a cherry on the cake, literally cherry on the cake, right? Think of it this way. If I start breaking this problem down, right? What is the fundamental thing that I'm going to be doing in cake making business? I'm going to be baking the base, I'm going to be having the frosting, and then I'm going to have a lot of cherries. Different. Think of it like a production line, right? Now, are you understanding what I'm trying to do here? I'm trying to break down what is happening. How many of you have learned DS algos in your, in your colleges? So you know the process, right? You break down the basic data structure and then you start combining them, you get nice new data structures, or you write an algorithm using different data structures. What is that one thing that we are doing there? We're taking a big problem, taking smaller elements to build a building block and then building the building on top of it, right? Similarly for a cake process. Now I'm taking this, the reason is when I start thinking like a component-driven, architecture, when I say component, these are all components, right? Cherry is a component, the batter is a component, after baking then the icing is the component, sometimes whipped cream, sometimes chocolate syrup on top, whatever the process is. You see those white lines across, horizontally cut? That's the thought process I am building with, right? So what if I take those components together and start bringing variety now? Now think of this example in your mobile apps. If someone comes and says, we need to do the next crypto app, right? We want to introduce a wallet in, say, how many of you are actually, okay, let's take a quick survey. How many of you have built a social app? Social app could be Insta kind of thing, okay. So you get the gist, right? The users are demanding for more. Photo upload karna hai, kabhi, then there is gallery and so forth. Just imagine building those UI screens. This is not a domain topic, this is a very UI topic, okay? Now imagine bringing variety over there. How difficult it is. How many of you have written text views? How many of you are still writing XML, by the way? Sorry. Koi hai? XML? अच्छा आज आप लोगों को बोनस मिलने वाला है आपके मैनेजर्स के पास because you're going to learn something in Compose today and you can actually go and propose it back, do your job much faster. So this is the intention that I'm trying to do, that I'm going to build a mobile system that then, or a design system, then that could give you these kind of components. And I can put it in any shape and size. Milkshakes bhi start kar sakta hu, I can do other things. Tempted enough? Excited? Okay. So I have a 1 hour talk, but I'm still going to keep it very interactive. Okay. I'm not going to be boring you with content. First half is purely going to be telling you what design systems are, and the second half is going to be about how to do it in Compose. Now, a quick question. I asked you about material design. How many of you use your own custom inbuilt, like in your companies? Do you have a custom design system? Okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay. So for you guys, how do you enjoy using a design system? Any simple idea, like, is it better than, there's this documentation, there's this video, there's this article on material design. Now I want to bring it on my side. Isn't it easy because it's so documented, right? Same thing, if you want to do it for yourself, a lot of the Indian CTOs and CEOs don't want to use material design. The reason is because they want to have their own persona on top, right? Designers don't want to use in a certain way. It's not like material design is bad, it's just that there are other options as well. We want to bring our own flavor on top. Instead of cherry, I want to put a nice little chocolate nugget or something, right? So we're going to take that as an example. That whole system that we were talking about is what a design system is, okay? The intention here is that it could include documentation, it could include components, it could be including something called the atomic design. Atomic means, how many of you have studied in science? Atoms, molecules, right? All this like thinking process, right? Now, what is a design system? It's just a collection of all these things put together so that we can then employ it in our mobile apps, web apps, whatever it is, right? This is the thought process. I'm just doing it in Compose. I asked you a question earlier. How many of you know what Kotlin multi-platform is, right? Now this design system that I'm going to be talking, it's my own open source project, but you can also use it on iOS, you can also use it on the Kotlin side. I've also, by the way, I'm currently working for a client that is building desktop apps for the ERP solution. ERP is something that you go to a pharmacy, you can, say I want 1 tablet of Crocin, that guy's tracking that data, how much inventory you have. We're building desktop apps on Compose. We're doing it for the, not the Apple Watch, but the Android Watch, and then we are also building it for Android and iOS, okay? So we are using this in production at the moment. But let's take this one at a time. Without a design system, what if you use material design and you had no guidelines, no designer, someone just says login page banana hai. How easy is it to build it? Your own wild imagination. Isn't it chaotic, right? It's like so much of work. अरे वो एक dribble.com पे साइट पे देखा या गूगल सर्च करने इमेज सर्च पे आई फाउंड वन लॉगिन पेज, आई एम गोना बिल्ड इट दैट वे, राइट? So this is like all chaotic. Imagine if I introduce one documentation, how to do login page the perfect way. Let's say I write one blog and I get it accredited by Google, say GDG Ahmedabad and so forth. How many of you will read that document and start employing? You see the ideology, right? You're going to be like curious. Oh, okay, किसी ने तो लिखा है. Someone is recommending it in a different way. So this is like fun. But the problem with this is that there's no feedback loop. You cannot talk to me. You will come back to me and say, sir, मुझे नहीं पता. I'm only seeing you as the source of this data, right? What if there are other options out there? That is where design guidelines come. That is where designers are important, right? Now, this allows us to bring automation. So one guy can design. He can also take other inputs from other designers from his own company, different companies. It's a community thing, right? You can actually get a feedback loop. And most importantly, if you have a design system, and if you go open source, your company is already the next silver, gold, platinum, and whatnot, right? Just imagine from that thought process. The intention here is not to sell your app to the user, but also to the community, right? Your app should be the best. How many of you know what Play Store top app of the year is? Do you know what a top app of the year means? It means that you're going to be credited by Google as the best app that was designed in Google. Every Google I/O, there are at least 25 selected, out of which only 5 or 10 are showcased on Google I/O stage. How many of you know what Google I/O is? Sorry, I see a lot of like, "Arey, kya bol raha hai ye?" Okay, so some folks are already aware of it. The intention I'm trying to do is that your app should not only sell the best cake in the world, but also show you or bring the user back to your app every single day. There's a concept called user retention, right? Retain a user to come back to your app, that intention. So with design systems, you can actually do better, and not just for Android, you can take it across to Android and iOS, okay? Now, a lot of theory, right? अब थोड़ा सा fun करते हैं. So we're going to be talking a little bit about what design system is, but I want to kind of show you, sorry for folks at the back, if you can't see it, I'll still read it out. Folks on the back, can you see the slides? Okay, cool, thanks. Okay, so design system brings something called style guides, there's component library, I spoke about components, then there is content guide. If you use this component, then do it this way. There's a guide, there's a documentation for it. Next, there are patterns. If you take two components together, make it into a card, that becomes a pattern. So there are a lot of those things together, right? And then there is the reference site, a website where you can go and literally, dish on the designer. Arey, kya documentation likha hai? How many of you like writing documentation over here? Okay, only 2. Okay, I'm going to change that. So in a design system, it's all about other developers, people who didn't raise hands, to read and come back to you and say, hey, this is correct, this is not. How do I use this? How many of you use floating action button? Okay, majority. How many of you have actually read the documentation of floating action button? How many of you know how many parameters are there in the XML side? There are 846 parameters that a fab internally uses, parameters or variables. How many of you know that number in the first place? No one, right? That's the point. So the website becomes the source of truth, that this is how the component is built and the thought process. So we need to write a reference side. Next, all this put together, this is how the diagram looks for a design system. Now I've very carefully given SCCPR, nice acronym, not owned by me, not trademarked by me. The intention here is that you can then utilize this thought process. Even if you have to sell this idea to your manager today, hey sir, हमने ऐसे लिखा है, वैसे लिखा है, but I want to standardize it across the platform. You can actually take this as a thought process and take it back, okay? Sorry, yeah. Now, a lot of people in the industry say this, right? A design system is something that is interconnected. It's the magic show because everyone comes together, right? Also, some people say it's reusable components. Why do you think that is reusable? Because I can reuse it in any app. Literally, because I'm an individual consultant. Now, in other words, I'm my own boss. I can go and work with anyone, right? Any company, any team, whatever. When I go in and they say, sir, Compose mein likhna hai, ya XML mein likhna hai, ya Flutter mein likhna hai, I have a consistent design. I don't care what the design looks like. I just know I'm going to write it in a certain way, right? Okay. So moving on, yeah. Now the best part of all of this put together, you get consistency, right? This is the goal. We're going to be going through all these goals later on as well. We're going to be writing higher quality code. How many of you agree by focusing, by using certain components from a design system, whether Andromeda or material design or whatever else you have out there? How many of you think you'll get consistency? You'll get consistency because You're going to be using it in a standard way, the keyword being standard, right? More importantly, faster builds. You don't have to, I wrote a text to here. Okay, I'll ask you a very simple question. How many of you have access to the entire code base, read, write access to your entire code bases? Okay, and how many of you have written UI design? Anything, it could be simple login page to a very complex. And how many of you have actually spoken to your co-peers in your own company? Arey, wo kaise kara tune? Wo chips kaise banaya? Or how did you get that button working in this way? How did you get that Uber style swipe button, right? The drivers do the swipe to, or used to swipe to accept a booking. So that becomes consistency, and that is what I mean. You don't have to rewrite. Just imagine writing piece of code that two engineers on the same team are writing in two different screens, but in a very different way. That is the problem you're trying to solve, okay? Most importantly, you get a better scalability factor and maintained code, right? And obviously stability. We always talk scale and stability, but we need to define what scale and stability is. Now, the most important thing is that you can focus on product, correct? How many of you are thinking of starting your own startup? Okay, 2 people. Okay, cool. You can switch between startup and this track as well. Sorry, I'm going to be asking a lot of questions because all of this put together is going to be helping you at the end of the day, right? I want to take you through the process. It's not a very stupid, like, okay, 5 lines of code, I'll dump it into my app, well and good. Not that, okay? More importantly, what we're going to be achieving here is that, let's say left side is iOS, right side is Android. Sorry, no offense, but imagine these guys build something and now iOS team gets hired. How difficult it is for them to do parity, right? So what if you had a common component that both of them can share? I'm not talking code. I'm just saying that in a certain way, the button should behave like this, okay? Moving on. There are also cons for this. Huge initial effort. And that's the whole point of this talk, that I have built it in one whole month in a way that you don't have to use material design, but you can also think of writing your own, okay? Most importantly, very less flexibility, because if I'm the only guy who's writing the design system for all of you, let's say I'm the lead design system expert in-house, let's say all of us are in the same company, right? Now the problem is I need one more help. I can't be doing all of this together. So there's a lot of those resources coming towards building this. So there's a huge con for that as well. But once you build it, you can make designers big money, because designers now get someone to listen to them. So just imagine you building a screen, correct? Guys at the back, you can actually come in the front. There's some seats here if you want. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Yeah, cool. Okay. You're going to be making the developers a little more productive, correct? The reason is because now the developer doesn't have to know how to write a certain screen. He has to focus on domain. How many of you do testing? Unit testing, instrumentation, end-to-end. Oh, good number, man. Ahmedabad is like fun. Good people here, okay. More importantly, I want the user to be happy, correct? Because at the end of the day, right now I'm using something called the Keynote app. I'm literally using my mobile to read my notes, and I'm using a MacBook Air to connect all of this. This is all connected through one. Imagine the UX that I am having here. I can read my notes here, I can do things. It's literally mirrored for me. That's the UX that you want, right? So you want components to be really powerful. Most importantly, planners. How many of you know what planners are? Your PMs and your PMOs and all those CX and all those UX engineers and so forth. These are people who put thought process of what the app should behave like. Even if you have not worked for a large company, I've worked for a few. I worked for a company called Gojek, pretty large in the at least South Indian domain, right? It's a very Indonesian company, a very Asian company, but then we had over 100+ engineers on mobile, Android alone, right? And then there were 30 other people just to manage me from different aspects. Someone will give me a design, someone will give me something else, and so forth. So when I think of an app, I'm going to be thinking of a UX. I'm also going to be focusing on the business goals, right? Let's say I'm building the next Facebook app, and I want to think of how to represent the list page or your home feed, right? Or let's say Twitter is almost about to die. Let's say I want to build the next Twitter. What is the thought process I have? So these are people who are thinking this question. You're not as a developer. We are still not in the equation yet. Then comes the designers. Someone tells them, "Arey, ye input lo. Design this DevFest logo like this. Define this way, or build this app. We want to build an app that looks like this." So we want to also help these designers do better productive work, right? They should not be running around, "Arey, approval nahi mila yaar. Upar wale bhai ne bataya nahi mujhe kya karna hai." So we don't want that to happen, right? Next, the most famous, the crowd that we are here, developers. There are loads of points here to discuss. One thing I want to kind of let you guys take away from this is that we want the UI to be efficient. How many of you want to write performant apps? जिसने हाथ नहीं खड़ा करा ना उसको ticket cancel. Thank you. Okay, and how many of you want a 5 MB app, not 500 MB app? You get the gist, right? Like we want, as developers, we also want to grow in the industry. We also want to see our users be happy. Me as a user of other people's app, like I keep dishing on Flutter, literally because the amount of engineers out there in the Flutter world is still young, correct? It's a very young concept. Now what's happening there is, there are few experts that are going to be somewhere here in the crowd, some speakers, some other folks who are already experts in this domain. But the point I'm trying to make is, irrespective of what platform you use, your app should be performant, right? So all this put together, from a design perspective, you want the users to come back, okay? Ultimately, a design system should do this. This is a very complicated math. This is 1 week for me. Now this process that you see here, I have a kickoff call for, let's say I want to build the next, the shopping app, correct? I want to build the next Meesho or the next, Amazon and the Flipkart, and I want to build an e-commerce app. Now there's this one manager above me who will say, Adit, aise hi karna hai, right? I don't want that to happen because then managers are not designers. They could be, but they're not, right? I want a kickoff call in such a way that designers, QA, engineers, there's something called the design sprint, where for 4 to 7 days, हम सब इस ग्रुप में बैठेंगे. We're all going to behave like the setup guys or the light guys or whatever to build this interface. We're going to be taking different roles every single day, and then we're going to be working on that. So that is what the spec, the prototyping stage, the spec fix, and all those are. This is not just a developer wala Zira chart. This is not Zira, by the way. This is not a Zira talk. The point I'm trying to make here is that every single box represents 1 or 2 roles. A designer can come in and say, Adit, aapne ye dhang se nahi banaya. Or a product manager can come and say, this is not the right way. This is not what the UX was supposed to be. He's going to consult a UX engineer, right? So stuff like that. And at the end of the day, agar Friday ko thoda sara kaam ho jaye, to shayad release bhi maar le, right? And if Play Store reviews work in time, so we may get our app rolling out, right? So we want to reduce this complicated process, but we also want these stages, the dotted lines. At every single point, I want someone to give me a feedback, this is correct. Imagine fixing a bug where 1 million users are using it and kuch phat gaya udhar. Something broke, random shit broke, just because you wrote a certain ID wrong in XML, right? Or you have used fragment in the world. I'm a big anti-fragment guy. Sorry, I don't like fragment lifecycle at all. But yeah, let's make this process shorter, right? A design system is, you must be wondering, Ari, ye sab itna bol liya, but what is, like the common doubts? Isn't it too restricting कि हमें एक system के अंदर ही रहना है? I can't use any third-party library because उसका UI अलग होगा. It doesn't have to be that. That's the beauty of things, right? I won't be able to explore a new style. It doesn't have to be, because you can talk to a designer and say, hey, I found this new design system, or I found this new design. Can we bring some of the components over, right? But with our theming on top, or our colors, typography, and so forth, right? And most importantly, what if it doesn't work? इतना मेहनत भी करा, 2.5-3 लाख का एक engineer खरीदा per month, but कुछ काम नहीं निकला, right? That's not the whole intention here. And this topic is not for managers, by the way. This is for us developers. I'm literally calling us developers because that is where the core value is, right? So the 3 simple checklists, okay? We're going to be making a list of things, right? Of what we're going to achieve by building a design system. Then getting, the people from the other side of the equation, managers and, owners of the companies and, other folks to come and buy into this process of building a design system. And then forming a designer team, forming a QA team, forming a UX. So let's take one at a time. Most importantly, I know this is a Compose talk, aap log bore to nahi ho rahe na? We're going to come to the point of what Compose is going to, this literally all these points is going to be like 5 lines of code at end of story. You're going to get all of this like goodiness at the end of the day. जैसे हम लोग सब swag के लिए wait करते हैं ना, 5 बजे कब बजेगा यार, 5 swag कब मिलेगा, right? But the point I'm trying to make from all of this is that you're going to be building something that is going to last. How many of you have changed jobs in the last 2-3 years? You get the idea, right? आपने कुछ code लिखा, आप किसी और team में चले गए, किसी और product में चले गए, but the next guy is going to want to kind of come and kill you, right? अरे क्या लिखा है भाई ने? मैं code quality के नहीं. I'm just talking about like how do I even use this app? Let alone the users. Me as a developer needs to understand how to do this better. So you're going to making a list of all the problems you have reflected back on. How many of you have written a UI screen and then realize, अरे ऐसे नहीं करना था, button थोड़ा छोटा width होना चाहिए. How many of you have got at least 3 or 4 reviews from your designers? यार ये अच्छा नहीं है, gradient नहीं है. Literally I have a production call after this talk where the designer is going to be blasting me with few other questions, right? कि ऐसे नहीं करना, वैसे नहीं करना, आपने ऐसे क्यों करा? So we're going to be reflecting on those thought process. We're going to be auditing and taking those pain points, right? When I say audit, take the last 3 years of your life in the Android world and figure out what you have done in the UI side. Like what could have been done better? Those are the problems you're trying to solve by the design system. That's the thought process. Most importantly, what are the core fundamental design principles that I want to employ? Now, how many of you use material design here? Okay. And how many of you know why was material design the way it is right now? Material, anyone using Android 13? How many of you like that stupid colory, like वो rainbow effect and all that? Like जहाँ जाओ color दिखता है. Notification आता है, blue में आता है. And then I'm like blind, like what the hell? Like I have OCD in terms of, if I scroll the list, that bounce thingy that happens at the bottom, that is colored now. Imagine going through all of this. These are the pain points. Like what if I want, like users को पसंद आता है. This is my personal opinion, I don't like it, but the user wants it in your app. How easy is it to do it? How many of you have actually Google searched how to write the bloody bounce thing in Android, right? That's the point. So, okay. Now, getting a buy-in. Now, the buy-in is, loads of things are there, right? There are many people that are going to be, straightforward, not going to be understanding what's happening. We're going to be identifying what are the reward points, right? We're going to be doing one-on-ones with each one of the team members and getting the people to buy into the system, right? I'm just quickly running because I've got a call from folks at the front key. I'm running out of time, but I'm still going to run through this, okay? Most importantly, what I want to highlight here is that final approvals. कि अगर बना लिया, फायदा क्या है? You're going to give them the reward versus, effort ratio. And then forming a team, hiring designers, front-end developers, having UX engineers, product managers, researchers who is going to talk to your users, and then having quality assurances, right? Now compose. How many of you are here for the compose part, not for the remaining? Just compose देखना है किसी को. I literally wake up every day, किसी ने कुछ अच्छा article लिखा है, someone has written a new library or not. That's how exciting compose is for me, right? The best part, and this is the only slide, this is the end of it, right? Like less code. Compose समझ गया तो कुछ नहीं करना, right? It's very intuitive because you write it once, you can reuse the, the components. There's something called slot pattern. Slot pattern is where you can bring other components in a slightly different shape and it will still work in the parent. The linear layout, how many of you use linear layout, right? You understand the principle, right? Most importantly, accelerated. I'm literally working on 4 different clients right now. All of them recently, thanks to my pushing them to buy into Compose, they started to write Compose. We are delivering faster. No comparison to Flutter, aisa nahi hai. I'm just saying that we are getting better native code without using frameworks like Flutter or React and so forth. Most importantly, it is the most powerful framework right now because Compose is not just built for Android. And Compose is not just a UI. It's 2 things, Compose as a framework and Compose as a toolkit, right? So Compose is a thought process. Now, where do we start? Let me introduce you to Andromeda, finally, the core principles, right? So we have Compose, sorry for folks at the back, we have Compose runtime, which decides how to do state management. And then we have Compose UI. And then we have the foundation, text, icons. Some folks, when I got introduced, some folks said they have used Compose, right? So you get the gist. Now this is what the thought process is. You have to build that kind of a design on the right, the components, the cake principle, right? I have one cherry, I have a batter, and I want to build that cake. That's the intention here, right? So when I do this element component page, right? I'm going to be introducing some, oh, sorry, my bad. Yeah. I'm going to be introducing something called Andromeda. This is not a pitch for myself. This is just purely from the fact that we can do this better, right? We can bring our own customizations on top. The simple design principles that we want the users to be more happy about what's coming out of the design, right? We are keeping users in mind, in focus. More importantly, documentation, primary task, right? And we find a balance of what's wrong in other design systems. How do we patch it for our use case? That's the intention, okay? And give enough controls. When you see the code, you will realize how clever this design pattern is, right? Now, sorry, yeah. So this is a sample app. You can find it on Play Store. Okay. You will have something as illustrations. You'll have icons. It's a very bare bones right now. It's a very beta, but the intention is more of a showcase. Not. I still use it in production. Obviously, more customized version. I'm going to be someday. Time मिल जाए तो शायद version 2, version 3 शायद कर पाऊँ, right? Now the intention here is this is all you write to get the goodiness of Android. I encapsulate the entire Compose component or the Compose screens that I want to build in a thing called Andromeda theme, right? Now, for Kotlin users, you know higher order functions. 5 points मिलेंगे अगर किसी ने नहीं बोला तो. ठीक है, cool. Okay, the intention here is that I take Andromeda Compose theme. I can also bring my own color system. I can write my own font family. So this is the advantage of that slot pattern I was talking about. I can keep racking up other things on top. Okay. Now, then there is a breakdown of how these things work. I'm going to be rushing through some of these, but just bear with me. All of this is open source. Don't worry. कहीं कुछ photo खींचने का ज़रूरत नहीं है. खींचना कर लो. But this is all available. When you do that Andromeda theme as a function, what I'm providing you is some default values. Kotlin syntax, right? I have font family, have colors, content. If you notice, the only thing I want to kind of highlight here is this. This is all you need to know, how to use a design system. This is the power of the developers. Now I'm talking strictly to the developer side of all of this equation, right? When I'm building this system, and one of you want to use it, don't want to build a design system, but you want to use it. How do you use it? You just call this function with your own content. The thing that I want to kind of highlight here is the last line. Content composable, @composable, and there is a lambda there. You can pass in anything you want, okay? Most importantly, there is something called composition local. Now this is very, very powerful thing. Not a topic for today, but I just want you to just remember this thing called composition local. If you want to come and talk to me later, I will be very happy to I can literally do a 14-hour talk on this. This is how complex the Compose system is, but also fun, don't worry. Okay, now on the Andromeda side, all this is great, but I also want to access those fonts, the colors and so forth. So I'm just showing this slide first. What's happening here is, we have colors, we have typography and shapes. These are all components. Remember those cherries and the cake world and those, batter? These are the things that I was talking about. I'm taking those and then using it internally, right? So coming to colors. If I take colors into equation, now these are common library colors. So I'm going to have primary section, secondary, territory, and so forth. This is the design principles that I'm employing in my design system where I want a background color. It's white in color. By default, all white apps. But I'm also a dark theme person. So all these colors will also have a contrast on the other side. When you download the sample app, there's a button on the top. You click on it, dark mode aa jata hai. And all the colors are based on that. Okay? Now, all these things put together, right? I'm going to be walking through very quickly, but the intent here is I have a class called Andromeda colors. The only thing I want you to focus on is that thing called stable on the top. I am telling to the Compose system that this colors will never change across the theme. So imagine this. On one screen, you want a blue theme, all the buttons in blue. On the other, you can actually call this class with your own values. That's the intention, right? In that screen, you want red, but that red will never change for that screen. Compile time के बाद, I'm not talking at runtime. Runtime पे आप कुछ भी कर सकते हो. You can be the material 13 or the U kind of a thing where you click one button, it becomes blue, say red, red, say green, and whatnot, all the magic colors. That's not the intention. With stable, I'm saying if it is a dark or not, I'm giving the support for that. More importantly, I use something like this, the import strategy, where I say, how many of you know how many color classes are there in Android package? There are 45 color packages, color class in the Android SDK, open source. So for that specific reason, if I have Android X in my dependency graph, I also have Compose in my dependency graph. I don't want to be having that fight with the IntelliJ or Android Studio. अरे कौन सा import करना है? So I have done this. Oh, sorry. Yeah. More importantly, I have given you the fill colors. The thought process is you're filling the colors somewhere, right? You're going to be writing this across primary colors. Intention is very straightforward. That screenshot that you saw, 5 different colors for primary, that's what this is for. Mute is for when you have a disabled button. Error is for when you have an error state and so forth. So I'm giving you these like annotated colors that can then be useful for you in the future. Baki, kuch zyada simple, bahut hi simple hai. I'm just using state objects and I say whenever a color is given to me, remember it across all compositions. How many of you learned link tree in your data structures? Compose is all link tree. So you're actually for every node you're giving that key color aisa hona chahiye, font aisa hona chahiye, if you want to use it, that is, right? Taking that one step further, secondary colors, nothing fancy. Content colors is for the content like text, या button के अंदर का content, या even cart का अंदर का content, cart view का, right? Most importantly, if you don't want to use any of the colors I have provided, that's okay, no hard feelings, but you can write your own custom. That's the point of a design system. Now, it's not a closed system, it's an open system. You can write some function like this where you can provide all these things for yourself, right? I usually use this principle across all the clients that I work for because they have their own design principles. They have different colors, different iconography, typography. I can pass in all those. Now, these are just colors, right? All I'm doing is just creating my own color scheme and then passing it in, right? Now, typography, the most fun thing of Android world. How many of you have seen an app which has only a text? Only text. Any examples? There's one guy, cool. Anubhav, what is, do you like it or not? Okay, cool. So, do you like the fonts on the app or the game, sorry? Okay, cool. So there was the font made up, like a huge play in the game, right? Because if you don't have a font, just imagine using Roboto across the entire app. It doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Take it with my hands-on experience. People want something unique. Or wo fancy Comic Sans wala nahi. Proper, like something that works together, right? So I've given you that flexibility as well. The intention here is that I want to build titles that way. If you can see it on the right side, right? I want a moderate, thin, I want bold, I want this, font weights and stuff. All of these are just one parameter in the design. How does it all work? Like this. You can design your own font theme. I'm using something called the Andromeda. I have my own custom font. But if you want, you can bring in Roboto, you can bring in other things. And this is just one of them. You can build 5 together, 6 together. If you're not sure how to use it, I'll show you in a second. What we're doing here is we have Andromeda typography class, nothing complex. I'm providing all those themes that were talking about. I'm converting my Andromeda interface and converting it back to Compose textiles. If you have used XML, in XML we would do something called style is equal to in a text view. In Compose you would say text inside it, you will pass the style. Or you would give it a font weight, you would give it a typography and so forth, okay? Sorry, I also have 5 more minutes, but I'm still gonna try and push through what all of this is. So this is the interface I was talking about. I'm giving a font family, I'm giving you, the weight, I'm giving you the size of it and line spacing if you want, right? How many of you have not figured out what baseline is? Anyone who knows baseline? मेरे तरफ से 5 star मिलेगा आपको. Okay, come and talk to me later. So if you have never used, baseline, it's a huge powerful thing. Just go and read the documentation and you'll know why I'm talking about it. Now, all this put together, at the end of the day, composition local at the very bottom, this provides text across all screens. Remember I told you consistency, right? How many of you have written code which like एक screen पे कुछ अरे यार मैंने 14 कर दिया SP. Some other place I've written 15, but they wanted the title to be the same. The intention of the title should be common. So I'm giving you the control, but also telling you that there are restrictions on it. So that is how I'm kind of controlling the factor. The important thing here is the textile. These are predetermined textiles that you can use as is or you can build your own, okay? Moving on, sorry. Yeah. Most importantly, remember that object class, Andromeda thing. Oh, sorry. Yeah, click too many times. What I'm going to do here is I'm giving you some default typography things that you can then use it in yours. If you're building your own design system, let's say you have some fancy name, Andromeda is a very boring name, right? But if you want to build something of your own, you're going to be writing stuff like this, typography, fonts, colors, and so forth, right? Just moving on, there are building blocks, obviously. Now I'm going to be working with different icons and so forth. I have a grid here. If you want to use some, these are a very low, very old design, but then there are at least 100 more icons that I've launched. These are icons that are open source, commercially licensed and so forth. But if you want to write that password thing, so there's also material design. How many of you know that there is something called fonts.google.com/icons? You can actually use that in Compose. You could use icons.default, icons.filled, icons.unfilled, and so forth. Similar concept, I have some icons that I'm giving you some animations on top. I have animated vector drawables, pre-customized in a certain way so that you don't have to write any of this logic. That's the whole intention, right? So an icon, again, when I'm talking about icon, in material design, there's also an icon. I also have an icon function because I want to do something customized. The thing I am doing is, I'm obviously writing some customizations like click handler. If I click the icon, I can pass in a long click as well. I can do some accessibility things. Like if for a blind user, if I use my app, I should be able to use the app in a certain way. The app should read out to me. So all those like small things, even though Compose provides these, many of us just, oh, that's a default NEGA. We just move on, right? Okay. Now, just moving on, sorry, I have a lot of less time. The important thing I want to kind of highlight here is, sorry, this guy, tint. For folks who wrote Compose, how many of you have tinted your icon? Arey, maine to blue dala tha, gray kaise ho gaya? So I have given you control for that also. If you notice, there is something called apply emphasis. You can change this emphasis based on what the screen state is. I literally have a, like, instead of error versus content, agar API fail ho gaya, depending on what the state, whether it's a 4G, 5G or internet, I change the icon colors, the emphasis of the color. कि यार आपका तो आप iPhone वाले नहीं हो तो इसलिए आपको ये color मिलेगा, blue color का. If I have 5G, I'll give you a green color. Something like that. You can actually control all of this, all through the theme, right? Most importantly here, if you don't provide one, I am going to unspecify it. I'm just going to make it whatever the color is provided from the resource, I'm going to consume it. Then I told you something about semantics. Semantics is content description. It's the long press. It's the little vibrate that happens when you press a button. Like that UX feedback. How many of you used ATMs and not got a feedback? Not the digital, sorry, not the physical button, but just imagine screen पे दाबना. कुछ feedback ही नहीं आता, screen दबा या नहीं, 50 बार दबाओगे उसको. So those kind of problems are also solved here, right? Moving on, buttons. Again, I'm just rushing through. Buttons looks like this: primary, secondary, tertiary. Tertiary is when you don't want an action to occur right away. You want some other implementation details, right? So just to show you what the code looks like, I'm going to be skipping some slides here, but then a button, all the fancy things that you want, content color uska andar ka. You also have this in material design. The intention I'm doing here is that, if you notice one very important thing, how many of you use Compose button, the material design? किसी ने background color change करने का try करा? कितना आसान है ना? Like it's a very sarcastic thing. It's so difficult because you need to have something called another class, dot default colors, dot the pressed color, the default. I've given you one simple background color, which can then decide whether it is pressed or not, based on what your theme tells you. If I have a blue button, it will automatically make a 50% alpha on top of it and then apply it when it is depressed. So I'm giving you like how many of you know different design systems? Cred wala neomorphism, right? Then there is a flat design, then there is like the complicated designs that we can talk of. All of those can be built right here. I've given a default state, you can actually override it. That's the beauty of Compose actually. Most importantly, the elevation. Now, elevation plays a huge trick here. I have done some fancy things. It's a discovery for you guys. Sorry, I'm running out of time, but do go and tell me how this code looks like for you. Try it with material design and then you realize, oh yeah, shit, ye to bahut sara complicated cheez hai. I've actually slimmed it down so that you don't have to write implementation. That's the whole point of it, right? Next, sorry, I'm going to skip the elevation part. Very simple interface, which even Compose does in the material design world. What I'm providing extra is that I'm going to maintain it as a state. So if I write the button as elevated in one screen and I want it disabled when the internet goes off, that logic can now be controlled through state. I literally have a val state, internet state is equal to remember internet hai ya nahi, depending on how the button responds to it. That's why I've converted it into a state, okay? Next, most important, basic shapes. I have dialogue, the bottom sheet dialogue and all those. You can write your own custom. These are some just basic examples of what I'm saying here. I have default, which I then provide through, the Andromeda theme. If you want more, you can actually provide your own themes. So imagine, आपने एक जगह declare कर दिया bottom sheet में rounded corners चाहिए, something like this. And just imagine writing it 30 times. हर 30 instance में आपको जाके लिखना है. What if the theme does that for you? That's the advantage of Compose, okay? And design systems like these. Most importantly, how does Andromeda look? Project structure, bot straightforward, nothing complex. It's an open source. You can find it on the GitHub. Most importantly, the result is this, that we provide window insets. Anyone? No? Okay, not even going to touch the topic. Uske liye extra 1 ghanta chahiye. But the point is, I want status bar to be transparent. Map screen, kabhi Google Maps dekha hai? Map flows behind, all those things. Then I want a circular reveal. When I click on some screen, ek screen se dusre pe gaya, that magical show that happens, circular reveal. All those, just wrap it around it, right? That's the advantage of, writing your own design. See, these are intentions from my side. These are my personal opinion, circular reveal works. आप लोगों के लिए शायद animation चलता होगा. Something else, something fancy, some transition. You can encapsulate all of that and then wrap the catalog theme. Catalog theme, when you go to the source code, you will see what I'm talking about, okay? What I just want to kind of highlight here is that from this one function, I can even control whether it's a dark theme or light theme. It's as simple. I remember I told you 5 lines. That much That's it, end of story. Your entire app can be encapsulated in the theme. And you have to write all those, design patterns, like मुझे font ऐसा चाहिए, colors ऐसा चाहिए, write in one function called catalog theme. You can extend it. How did I do this? I encapsulated Android theme with my own customizations, right? I wrote my own catalog fonts as well. The results, well, remember this diagram that I showed you before? We had Compose runtime, UI, foundation, and material design. All I'm introducing is our own design system. You're still going to be using material theme if you want, but if you want to have some customizations, you can build your own design. That's the point and the powerfulness of writing Compose, right? If you want to still check this out, there's Andromeda on GitHub. You can take a screenshot, or I have a very fancy thing that whenever you do this, remember that keep it very lean, right? ऐसा नहीं कि पूरा app बनाना छोड़ दो और अगले 1 साल तक design system ही बनाते रहो. There are open source solutions. You can take this, contribute back. One PR, you get a nice clap from me, right? But then the point is that you can take all of the learnings from here. You can build your own, but there are also open source libraries. Some of those kind of beliefs that I do is we believe in design systems. I hope that's the takeaway for today. But there are loads of other design systems that are there. You already are aware of material design. Remember I asked you a question. There are thousands and thousands of more of it, okay? But with that, that's all, folks. If you want to kind of capture all of this in a nice little PDF that आप अपने घर जाके कर सकते हो, you can scan this QR code. And with that, if you have any questions, I think I have less than 1 minute. But if you have one question, I can take that, and I can do the rest offline. Any questions? No? Cool? Compose, oh yeah, sure, please. So you're talking about SaaS, where you want to build it once, you want to provide it as a service. You can't do that. See, think of even the device, our platinum sponsor, right? They have this interface, dashboard की बात कर रहा हूँ, Flutter के नहीं, dashboard की बात कर रहा हूँ. They must have used a design system there as well. You can actually build this as a system and sell it as a service also. But the problem I am trying to solve here is that the minute you make it closed source, पैसा दे के ही आपको मिलेगा. It's great model for you, but for designers, like developers like us, सारे मेरे पास नहीं है. मेरे मैनेजर नहीं मान रहा है क्योंकि वो क्लोज सोर्स है. एक तो डेवलपर्स नहीं होंगे. ओपन में बनाओगे जैसे मैंने बनाया. Again, this is just an idea, my opinion. You get a little more benefit for 5 लोग at least यहाँ पे GitHub पे, I hope at least 5 of you will go back to GitHub and search for it and start using it. Maybe for your sample project, maybe for becoming a GD, आपने एक app बना के कुछ talk दिया. Who knows, next DevFest will be right here with me, or me there and you here. That's the point. So if you want to do a SaaS, you can do this. There are loads of those services, like I think there's something called the Goat. Goat is one of the examples. They have a SaaS product on the design system. They use it that way. Any other questions? Sorry, I'm just going to take a very quick thing. No?
Yeah, I think we'll wrap.
All right, cool.
That was
Thank you
a
guys.
great session. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach him out personally. Adit, just hold on there. We have something for you. Guys, give it a huge round of applause for Adit.